Sir Michael Lyons joins me now. Welcome, Sir Michael, in a particularly ingratiating way. You have your meeting, your crunch meeting, with the Director General on Wednesday.
We do.
Now, there's been a lot of worry expressed by BBC journalists in particular that the sort of core part of the BBC to many people, which is the news and the factual, documentary, current affairs part of the BBC, is going to take swingeing cuts. Is that the kind of thing that you can take a view on?
Well, the Trust has taken a view, and we've been looking very carefully at the Director General's plans over the last few months, and as you say, our meeting on Wednesday of this week will make the final decisions about the framework for the next 6 years. So not all the detail, but the framework. And so the big issues that we've been seeking to tackle, is one, that the BBC needs to be more distinctive into the future, doing those things that other people don't do, and also those things that it does do, doing them in a distinctive way. It needs
so possibly fewer sort of cookery and reality and that kind of thing.
Let's be clear, there is less money than was originally expected. There are many, many demands on the BBC in terms of different audiences, different technologies. So there has always been difficult choices to make. And yes, running through all of this debate will be a very strong imperative to get absolutely the most from every pound of licence fee payers' money. And that goes even in those areas which the public themselves cherish as the most important areas of BBC output, and that's news and current affairs and knowledge and education. So they're right at the top of the public's list, but they can't be protected from the search for greater efficiency.
But if, after this process, the Today programme, the BBC News, Panorama, was doing less than it used to do, or its coverage was less authoritative in any way at all, would you regard that as an acceptable outcome?
Well, I'd want to distinguish between those. I mean, I think the only way that that the budget is going to be balanced is by doing less. The BBC will undoubtedly be smaller in 6 years' time than it is today. And the emphasis the Trust has placed on issues of efficiency is to make sure that the first question we ask always is, can you do something at lower cost without reducing its quality?
And let's be clear, Mark Thompson said in the papers today that that means making fewer programmes.
Undoubtedly, it means making fewer programmes, but the other side of the equation, of course, is that one of the reasons for making less is so that you can concentrate the resource to ensure distinctiveness. So there's not a question here of diminution of quality.
Which, since there's no closure of channels coming, must mean more repeats.
Well,
it's a mathematical inevitability.
It does mean that, well, let's deal with the question of repeats. Firstly, let me firmly say that there's no rowing back on the policy of seeking to minimise repeats in prime-time BBC One airtime. So that policy stays in place. But, of course, what we know from our own viewing and listening is that actually there is an appetite to catch up with high-quality programmes which we might have missed the first time round. So
BBC sort of 2, 3 and 4, but particularly possibly 3 and 4, could see more re-showings of popular shows which have been on 1 and 2.
They will be programmed from amongst the sort of the quality product the BBC produces, but yes, there will be repeats there.
Now, it was reported that you've slapped down some of my colleagues. It's very rare for me to be in the position of trying to defend either Paxman or Humphreys.
Yes.
The brave man who'd try that. But you described their interventions as untidy. I think the problem for a lot of BBC journalists is that if they're not allowed to criticise what's about to be decided, then there's your meeting on Wednesday and it's a fait accompli, it's too late. You can understand their frustration.
I can understand frustration, but let me come back to focus particularly on what I said rather than the way that it got coloured in reportage. Firstly, I didn't pick out any individual personalities. I'm not looking for a fight with any particular presenters here. My message was to the whole of the BBC, and it wasn't, there is no room for debate, you mustn't say anything. Of course there must be a flourishing debate, but the flourishing debate should be inside the BBC. It would be, I think, regrettable if the message that was sent out to the public, the people who pay for the BBC, at this important time when we unveil the Director General's plans for the next 6 years, if what they heard was an internal battle, which essentially is a self-protectionist battle. What they want to hear is that that money is going to be used. Every pound of it is going to be squeezed to get the maximum value. The BBC is going to be more distinctive in the future, that we are going to offer something to everybody who pays a licence fee, but equally we're going to cherish those loyal audiences and the products and the programmes which they put the highest value on.
But you know that the unions inside the BBC are very worried. There's a lot of talk of 600 jobs going in news and current affairs, which is a heck of a lot of jobs. Are you saying that once your decision has been taken, you've agreed with Mark Thompson, there is room for genuine internal debate, providing it's not on programmes like this or the Today programme, that's internal, and that that's not the final deal? Or are you saying that that is the final deal?
It sets the framework. It doesn't set all of the detail, and clearly the Director General and his management team will need to work that through. In some areas, there'll be need for very specific debate and discussion. In terms of the consequences for employment, that will inevitably be subject of the statutory requirement to consult very carefully. So there's lots of debate to come, but the most important thing is that at this point we send a clear message to the public that the BBC is focused on their interests, what they pay for in the licence fee, rather than just the aspirations and employment consequences of its staff, sure, important though they are.
Sure, we understand that, but when I talk about 600 jobs in news, 2,000 jobs plus maybe generally, you're not saying to me I'm scaremongering.
Well, Andrew, I'm not going to deal with any detail today, but let me underline that there is no part of the BBC's output that can be exempt from the search for better value. And that's a very strong message that the Trust has given to the Director General. There are no protected areas. If you can do things more effectively in any area, even the priority areas of news and current affairs, then you have to make those savings.
5 years' time, what's the BBC going to look like?
It's the big challenge, I think. When Mark Thompson brought forward his Creative Futures vision, he properly focused on the BBC of 2012, the debate that will undoubtedly have been embraced about the future of the licence fee and all the technological and market changes which are taking place at the moment and will continue. What will it look like at that period? Well, I think smaller, certainly. If the Trust has its way, more distinctive, better able to demonstrate that it uses its money wisely and effectively, and continuing with that very special role the BBC has to contribute to the very nature of the country in which we live.
And the very, very rough last few months, all these crises and scandals and so on, as Chairman of the Trust, calibrate how you regard the seriousness of this.
Well, there have been some serious errors revealed. There's no doubt about that. They're not apocalyptic. They haven't fundamentally threatened the BBC. And in every case, both the management and the Trust have treated them seriously. And there are a set of actions now agreed to be carried forward to deal with the problems identified. I think we ought perhaps to take a lesson out of the England rugby team. You know, when times are looking hard, just concentrate on the core job, and that will see you through.
And do you think the licence fee is something that can be justified forever and a day?
I think that is a question right at the heart of how we deal with the challenge of a little less money than we expected, and how we make the BBC more distinctive. If the British public are convinced that they're getting value for money, they're getting something which others don't provide them with, they'll continue to pay the licence fee.